November 27th, 2020. A person is showering. She hasn't showered in a few days. Her skin and hair is very oily. The realization hits her. Oil floats on water. Human skin is already oily. A thought reaches her mind, an urban populace, reality realizing its own truth, yes. People rising towards the sky en masse in a catastrophe. An incident. A Heaven Stairway Incident. This thought was the genesis of the genesis. A start point to a history. The spark of light to something that would change my life and those of many others. This video serves to chronicle that history, the aftermath and emergence of the wider Trollface incidents, and the incident itself. Section 1. The History. Every story has a beginning, and while the shower was the very beginning, it doesn't serve to explain what really led up to it, nor the finer details. Part 1. The origin point. Obviously, a lot of the Heaven Stairway incident wasn't even original to myself, but rather an innovation and permutation of many things that came before it. I wouldn't like to focus much on the prehistory. If you want to know a much more in-depth explanation of what led up to this, I recommend Captain KRB's video, The Resurrection of the Trollface. Though I will give a quick rundown. Back in 2008, the Trollface was made by I don't know, and a DeviantArt comic making fun of internet trolls. The face spread, and Trollface was born. It lived nearly on top of the world, and died as the MLG era hit its full course. From here, it was a silent affair. Some small communities used Trollface ironically throughout this drought, like the one I've been in that helped spread the Heaven Stairway image after I made it. More on that later, though. Then, in early 2020, some 9gag user took the old troll physics or troll science format, a popular format during Trollface's golden age, which would take absurd actions and justify their impossible results via common sense or pseudo-logic. One such example of the time was tilting your computer sideways to use gravity to cause the loading bar to fall quicker. This user, years after the format had expired, took it and made a fresh, unironic iteration of the format. This was the cover yourself in oil meme, something that recurred over 2020 and hit its full force in the later part of the year. As it was losing its steam, a few horror interpretations showed up, such as the cover yourself in blood edit and subsequent video animation. There were also the original trollge videos, but again, more on that later. What led up to the Heaven Stairway incident was a childhood observing creepypasta culture, the recency of cover yourself in oil, and a simple realization of something everyone else overlooked. Human skin is already oily. To elaborate in my moment in the shower, I legitimately suddenly thought of the title. Or at least it felt that way. The date came last, and the city came second. The phrase Heaven Stairway Incident just popped in my head. It made sense to the codename of some paranormal tragedy, a line of conceptualization I have SCP to thank for, as well as my own past writing crappy articles for an FNAF SCP hybrid fanfic universe. The incident itself isn't really biblical in nature. It doesn't depict the rapture as many believe. It's simply people rising into the heavens, going into the sky and never returning in spirit. New York was picked just because it was an absurdly large metropolitan area. If there were anywhere some random internet user coming across my post would be from, due to being an English speaker, it was statistically likely to be NYC. Personal connection can add on to fear even if there's no good reason for it, and especially if it could affect you but you aren't mentioned anywhere in the threatening information. The date, ambiguously May 2021, was almost in the past. It was definitely going to be only a month and a year. I picked May because I figured that's when it'd be most likely to rain, but the year was more up in the air at first. My original thought was to have it be in 2019, tying back into the incident name as though it were a cover-up of some kind. But I decided on 2021, both because May 2021 was when I figured the vaccines would be mostly rolled out, and because making it a prediction or a premonition would feel more mysterious or ethereal. So, then, I get out of the shower. Almost didn't make the image because I was tired and wasn't sure if it was worth it for a joke I hardly thought people would understand. Tell my idea to my 2 main servers to gauge interest, and then get to work. Given my own lack of faith in the idea, I actually didn't put much effort in the edit. I lazily upscaled the Cover Yourself in Oil comic in Paint.net and applied the oil paint filter to try and smooth it out. Inverted a Trollface image, very high res, I have it for some reason, I don't know why. Erased the edges with a low opacity eraser, and overlaid it on some person's arm for the human skin is already oily panel. Then, the final panel, the one that truly set everything in motion. I simply took a photo result I thought looked good on Google Images for rainy NYC, changed the contrast, removed the people standing on the dock, and added a shit ton of people in the sky, which were just downscaled images of people falling or flying. Then I posted it to Twitter, posting it in the Discord servers I frequent, and sat back and watched what happened. Part 2. The Experiment. It blew up instantly. I don't think any specific big account retweeted it at first, it was just a bunch of retweets that flooded in with seemingly no source. My normal followers and then some would retweet. Sure, I kind of expected that, but I didn't expect it to just take off. People that didn't even know me posting in comments, some asking if it was real. It was surreal and went by fast, as me and my friends freaked the hell out over the success. There were some reposts that I dealt with, and a lot of explaining I had to do, but it was awesome overall. It was more attention than anything else I had made ever received, gained seemingly in an instant. At the time, the post ended the night with around 500 likes, but now it sits at 1,200 retweets, 6,200 likes, and with 300,000 people having seen my initial tweet. Naturally, the next question was what to do with this. Clearly, this was a rare opportunity. The internet content creation game is largely just throwing stuff at a wall until it gets lucky. I talked to my friends, some get working on early meme iterations. My friend Sinatra made a meme based on Tom Scott. Pepper made a video using the image with some ambient music over it that reached over 700,000 views. And Orbital Dot made the first derivative incident meme. Yes, even before Aurora Woods, this was the first incident made after mine. We speculated and plotted to make incident memes their own thing. We had to dissociate it from Cover Yourself in Oil, and we thought to remove it from Trollface entirely, focusing on the creativity of attaching currently relevant memes and extrapolating their jokes into horrible events taking place in the near future or past. The Angel's Descent incident was the first execution of this idea, though more tied to my original image for obvious reasons to try and ease into things. In a way, this was an actual conspiracy to create a meme subgenre, an experiment to see how far we could go. I, myself, would just make the occasional follow-up image, but in the midst of high-stakes experiments, something always seems to go wrong. Part 3. The Perversions. I mentioned early on that there were a few reposts early on Twitter. This was the first example of things getting out of my control, but it's to be expected and largely how memes spread. It wasn't just on Twitter though, most Twitter reposters ended up crediting me after I found them, but there were also posts to subreddits like /r_true_Reddit and /r196. What the hell are you people naming these? And then later iFunny, which would become immensely important later. Of course, there were also the few YouTube uploads, often with spooky ambient music, starting with Pepper's upload. These reposts were essentially just repeats of my thread in terms of reception, though the iFunny users had some of the silliest reactions. What was most interesting, though, was the repost to 4chan's paranormal board. This wasn't like other reposts, which had the full context of the oil comic. No, this dude posted only the final panel and acted oblivious, asking what it was. A few people thought it was the Rapture, some people just made their own lore up on the spot. Others were just calling the OP an idiot. This was the first abstraction of the incident away from its roots in the oil comic, and it was actually extremely influential. It was the top of the Google results back then for Heaven Stairway Incident, the first thing people looking it up saw in a mysterious light. This led, then, into the out-of-context Reddit post on /r catastrophic failure, where this Redditor, this swine, this cretin, perverts the understanding of my meme in the minds of many. This post brings forward the adage that the incident was caused by an oil tanker, completely missing the point of the original joke. This was likely due to early discussion in the /x thread, just mentioning it is an oil joke and not directly linking the image at first. But it was catastrophic. That's so dumb. You can even see in my pinned comment on Pepper's video a cryptic message about how the oil tanker isn't real. It wouldn't be the worst bit of misinfo, but it was the first, and as such, fairly prevalent. What was the worst perversion of the idea? Well, first we'll have to take a trip to the Golden Arches. A while after the initial post, and things started slowing down in terms of discussion about Heaven Stairway. But, all of a sudden, I get tagged into the server with Pepper and Orb. A message. jschlatt mentioned Heaven Stairway in a video. Now, we joked about something similar beforehand, as various YouTubers had mentioned the incident on Twitter. It honestly felt kind of inevitable, but it didn't make what had happened any less shocking. In the process, though, it led to the personally most disgraced part of the whole meme. Carson and his friends sent Schlatt the Heaven Stairway photo and gaslight him, saying they only see a Happy Meal in the backseat of a car. It was a funny bit for the one video, but not when it's spammed in every comment section relating to the meme. And the guy who started the joke about the Happy Meal ended up in disgrace, which only makes it very uncomfortable and annoying to me. If all you have to say when you're reminded of the incident is, "Why are you getting so upset? I just see a Happy Meal in the backseat of a car," you're just kind of parroting. On a lighter note, though, the most prevalent bit of misinformation is simply discourse over what date it occurs on. This was as far back as my initial post and continued all throughout May, and wasn't helped when other interpretations would be made that made their own dates for the incident. A sizable amount thought the incident occurred on the 21st, simply because of Gravity Psi. More on interpretations like the Gravity Psi pasta, and what the actual date is, later. Section 2. The Aftermath. As the beginning dies, we're led to a silver age, a age of decay that ends in rebirth, where it becomes bigger than ever. Yes, by the end of this, we will have surpassed just the constraints of Heaven's Stairway. Part 1. The Decay. Around the middle of December to late January, Heaven's Stairway essentially died. Nothing related to it was being made, and discussion of it was limited. One of the few things of note in this time was the creation of the Know Your Meme page on Heaven Stairway, which essentially serves as the only real proof I have that I'm responsible for this. Of course, you could just use different image search techniques or just search techniques in general to find that my Twitter post was the first occurrence of it, but besides that, no. Everything was dying down. People were moving on, and I was still caught up in how surreal the experience was and dealing with personal stuff, as at the time my parents still didn't know I was trans. My point is that it was a bit of a stressful time, and rightfully so, considering what could be my one shot at notoriety was currently fading away. It was funny, though, it still helped me at this time. I actually wrote an essay for English about my experience with it. Still, though, I was beginning to develop an increasingly negative mindset about the whole thing. No one knew I made it, more people called it a happy meal than getting the original joke, the same things repeated ad nauseum. Even /r/196 early on had a few posts complaining about users that are spamming it for no reason. Everyone either didn't get it or liked it for reasons that it was not made to represent. It kinda hurt, and it felt like I was just as irrelevant and pointless as I had been before. This changed, though. I realized having a negative mindset on it would probably be for my downfall rather than anything, especially considering I had something blow up to that extent in the first place. Normal people don't have that happen, but if I could point to any one moment helping me, it would be this. One day, I get tagged in a Twitter mutuals server. Someone recognized me as the person that made Heaven Stairway. This was a tad shocking by itself, but what they said helped tremendously. Unfortunately, I cannot find exactly what they said due to the server now being deleted, but we had a nice conversation about it. They told me how it was one of their favorite memes, how them and their friends had made fucking t-shirts of it. Not for money or anything, but just for themselves. They even offered to send me one, which I respectfully declined. That genuine enthusiasm and joy over something I made was healing in a way. And then I thought about how many people had their lives improved even slightly by it. It doesn't matter that it was out of my hands now, it wouldn't be here without me. That means I still helped people. That's all I ever wanted. To try and inspire others and bring just a bit of happiness with stuff I create. That's all I ever want. And as I become more happy with what I had done, my influence via the meme was just about to skyrocket again. But to explain that, first we'll have to talk about Part 2, the sibling. Quick rewind back to the start of everything. No, perhaps just a little further back. Just as though Heaven Stairway was a result of a long series of Trollface memes, another entity followed a completely different path over the same amount of time. From Wine's original Trollface in 2008 to a GIF of Trollface smiling made in 2012 by an unknown author, to an increased contrast version uploaded by iFunny user Jolene C in July 2020, to, finally, being released only 10 to 5 days before a Heaven Stairway post, a series of videos posted once every day counting down the arrival of an event called the trollge. Trollge was probably just a portmanteau of the words troll and purge. Well, not probably, it is. Yes, the trollge wasn't originally the entity's name. In fact, the OP/you/unfunnyman123 just calls the entity Trollface. Now, some of you may think that due to when these videos were made that it was a direct inspiration for Heaven Stairway. The thing is, it wasn't. I had seen them beforehand and thought they were funny enough to save them, but I had just about forgotten about them the week later when I made Heaven Stairway. They just happened to be made at the right time, using the right themes and appealing to similar memes. Trollge evolved from a darkened Trollface, while Heaven Stairway evolved from Cover Yourself in Oil. And together, they were about to graft once more. December 16th, 2020. Just as though Trollge had spread it a lot on iFunny through reposts, so too did Heaven Stairway. User Melgjugman posted a comic. 4 panels. Used steps. It had the troll face, but it wasn't quite what would become known as trollge yet. This evolution, as normalcy degenerates into 3 panels of progressive insanity, culminating in an incident. An Aurora Woods incident. This image changed a lot about the legacy of what I had created, as it distances largely from the origin in Cover Yourself in Oil, but keeps things like the steps. It shifted that tone away largely from grand-scale occurrences like many an NYC flying into the sky, instead making the Trollface often the only entity in the comic. It was isolated, claustrophobic, lonely. Even if the demented Trollface would take action that could harm the globe itself, it was all that was there. Almost undetected to me at the time, since I don't use iFunny, other posts appeared. Some make fun of game events like the Resonance Cascade and Half-Life 1, while others make fun of real-life tragedies. But one Instagram user would incorporate the trollge into their incident in January 25th, 2021. From there, trollge and incidents fuse. Then, the experiment from earlier concludes. Now we have Part 3. The results. Orb's derivative comic from earlier, operating under the plan to make it a meme, spread. We didn't notice it did at the time, but it directly led into later derivatives like Aurora Woods and other early instances. It increases in popularity fast as /r/Trollface Incidents is created, and so does the Trollface Incidents Twitter account. Fuck you, by the way, for not posting my other comic and getting the day wrong multiple times. Just kidding. I don't have any beef. It's fine. I don't really care. What we couldn't account for, though, was the incorporation of trollge. The initial plan was just to make incidents themselves a meme and tie them into memes other than Trollface. But with the recency of the two and ease of creation, Trollface, and therefore trollge, became integral to the future of Trollface incidents. So the experiment was successful, but for reasons not entirely in our control. With this development, though, it spread goddamn everywhere. I was tagged every so often with people just finding it in the wild, online friends saying they saw incidents being talked about in their own IRL friend groups. It was wild. That said, it was also now completely out of my control. There was a lot of creativity, but also a lot of laziness. People made high-effort content, and people made low-effort content. Some people made memes of real-life tragedies in a rather insensitive way, while others would create brilliant shit like the first trollge incident by Malicious Bunny, as well as various Friday Night Funkin' mods of all things still in development, such as the Funkin' incident and Malicious Bunny's own Blue Balls incident. It does bring to mind, though, the question of when it will all end. Every meme has an expiration date. Trollface will have a second death eventually. It's really a question of when. Does Trollface and trollge have the staying power akin to Doge, or is it simply just another fad that'll die out by next year? Only time will tell, but creativity is a must if it wants to continue. A lot of problems with current Trollface incidents is that they're not really funny or have a clear joke to be made. Part of what made the original blow up was that it was actually had a joke. Many people now complain about how current Trollface incidents feel uninspired and samey, and this more or less foreshadows their death unless further innovation arrives. Section 3. The Incident. Now that the history of Heaven Stairway and Troll incidents has been explained, now I get to explain the incident itself. The misconceptions people have had, the interpretations people have had, and the truth of what the incident actually is. Part 1. The misconceptions. A lot of the misconceptions were already mentioned previously. The oil tanker was one of the first major deviations from truth that people believed, just because it showed up at the top of Google when you searched up Heaven Stairway for a while. This stemmed from a Redditor shitpost, and unfortunately spread really far into people's perceptions and making them miss the joke. There was also the Happy Meal thing, which is just annoying and overly prevalent. Think of it like JoJo fans spamming the comment sections of music uploads with JoJo references, completely ignoring the actual song and simply inserting references to the creators they like over the original media. I do mention the Happy Meal thing briefly in one of my follow-up edits, but it's more to make fun of the people who spam it than anything. No, I don't hate you if you did it, by the way, I just personally dislike it. Like, if I cared, that'd be really fucking pretentious, because it's just a dumb meme edit I made. So, yeah, just have fun. Then, the last thing I mentioned a while ago is all the discourse over the dates. It started as early as the iFunny reposts and continued even now. A lot of people have said stuff like May 15th early on, but the most popular date ended up being May 21st because of a few factors like prior end-of-the-world predictions and the creepypasta by Gravity Side. Some people thought it happened over the entire month, but there is a canon date, and I'll reveal what it is later. Beyond this, though, there are still a few more misconceptions. Some people even thought the people in the image were falling instead of rising, akin to the Angel's Descent incident. This is obviously not the case. The other thing, stemming as early as the /X post, is people thinking it was a prediction of the rapture. No, it's not the rapture. People aren't ascending to the heavens, they are going into the sky and choking to death. Part 2, the interpretations. Various creepypastas and other short stories were written as a result of Heaven Stairway. For a lot of people, they may even be where they first heard of it. This section is meant to go over a few of them. Naturally, these are more or less summaries and won't go into proper detail on the stories. If you want to know more about them, you'll have to check them out yourself. Links are in the description. By the way, this section is super long, so because I have to give story summaries and I don't want to skip over key events. So if you don't want to deal with that, just skip ahead to the more timestamp if I remember to put it there. I don't know, I'm stupid, so I might not have. Interpretation 1. The Other Dude Pasta. The writer of this one is actually someone I loosely knew for a long time before any of this happened. They asked my permission if they could make a story based off it, and I said it was fine. They kept it fairly short and posted the story to the /r/short scary story subreddit, go figure. It's laid out fittingly in a format very reminiscent of early SCP. The article starts by mentioning the date of the incident, on the 19th, and in describing it as Heaven Stairway Incident A. Oh god damn, my dog just fucking barked. I don't care. An incident report follows, describing normal rain but unusual bodies that begin raining. These bodies have strange, contorted grins, and by the end of the rain, they cover every inch of the city. Their limbs are too long, their joints often missing, and covered in oil. Some recognize them. People gone missing in the 2010s. But they're freshly dead, and satellite observations say the bodies came from the clouds themselves. The incident report is cut off with descriptions of those outside being splashed in the oily substance by the falling bodies, being unable to fully wash off the substance, and therefore being forced into quarantine. Then, another incident date. The next day, Scene B. Those exposed to the substance rose into the sky, never to be seen again. Work in progress SCPs. There were a few people who approached me to see if I was fine with them using the concept for an SCP article. I was fine with that too, though apparently the image of the incident itself can never be used on an official article due to it containing a stock photo. It needs to be original. The main one starts with SCP number and object class, which is Keter. From here, the eyes are drawn to a picture of metal barrels with a strange insignia on them. The special containment procedures state that barrels should be buried in an unknown location in northern Africa, with the number of barrels numbering more than 65,000 in total. 2 MTF teams are designated. One is to collect and terminate any witnesses, while the others hunt online for any leads and censor them from the public eye. The page then goes on to describe the SCP as an unknown type of oil that is kept in the prior mentioned barrels, with the insignia on their side corresponding to instructions representing the Cover Yourself in Oil comic and being branded under hydrophobic solutions. The oil neither combusts nor is able to turn solid by freezing. Any object that comes in contact with the oil floats on water, being totally hydrophobic. Any entity exposed to it is designated as a Lucifer, I don't fucking know. When one of these objects contacts rain, it begins to float up to cloud level, with most sentient ones dying on the ascent, with any survivors immediately plummeting to the ground once the precipitation stops. Then, the article describes the Heaven Stairway Accident. One of the teams responsible for collecting barrels retrieved 10 of them and were traveling to New Jersey to dispose of the contents. While going through New York, a fight broke out in the truck, causing the barrels to go loose out the end after crashing into a restaurant. More than 3,800 people were affected with the oil spilling onto the road outside, as various individuals caught the event on camera. All evidence of this was destroyed by the online team, and the state of New York agreed to transmit a medic agent online and on TV. Other interpretations. Before we talk about the most influential interpretation, it's worth mentioning a few more that were less overt. Of course, there was the Angel's Descent incident right at the beginning, which isn't canon but does show another greater continuation of events. Beyond this, though, there are the aforementioned Malicious Bunny videos, which reference Heaven Stairway in the beginning of the first. This is indicative of the greater mythos that trollge has created in general, though, as various users on places like /r/trollge mention it as well in ways that differ from most other sources. Gravity Sigh. Gravity Sigh had made a creepypasta based on Heaven Stairway back in January that really blew up on its own, having around 500,000 views at the time of writing. They released a remake utilizing multiple VR scenes on the 21st, as that is the date the incident occurs in their interpretation. It single-handedly propelled their YouTube channel forward. The video starts with a rather loud title card of the incident's name, before leading to a slide that dates March 4th. Residents of Staten Island report sightings of flashing lights from televisions and radio sets. An investigation of the electric grid yielded no malfunction. March 11th. A fog engulfs Manhattan. Residents being evacuated as it is believed the fog is a gas attack. He also described the sounds of metal scraping against each other. Over 30 people were unrecovered. March 22nd. A subway worker reported an event where 10 1980s-style subcars entered the station. 58 people boarded these cars. A team is sent into the tunnels to find them, but none are found. March 31st. A ferry between Staten Island and Brooklyn stops suddenly, and the Coast Guard is sent to investigate to see if there is a hostage situation. The outside and interior of the vessel were coated in various human tissues. Those that were not gored were fused into the walls of the ship itself. All 150-some were declared dead, and the event was covered up. April 3rd. Phone calls from Queens report birds falling from the sky, with no cause found. April 5th. A prison riot is staged, with the rioters being found to have pale skin, bulging veins foaming from the mouth and bleeding from their orifices. The prisoners that incited the riot reportedly complained of insomnia and psychosis the nights prior. All involved in the riots, including witnesses. April 12th. Many fish started floating to the water's surface, having corrosive damage to them due to now extremely acidic local waters. Areas accessing the waterways were blocked off. April 21st. The Brooklyn Bridge collapses. 216 people pass away. Footage leaks of something trying to lift the bridge, though instead collapsing it by accident. All footage is censored. May 1st. Explosions occur under the Manhattan sewers, killing 36 people. No cause was found. May 3rd. Queens is awoken by a flash of light as a team is brought into the morning to deal with cleanups. May 9th. People begin looking up into the sky en masse and mumbling for a short period of time before leaving. May 11th. Blue-robed individuals meet in a park, seizing and dying at the spot. They had all taken cyanide capsules. May 13th. Millions of people received calls from dead family asking them to join them until screams erupted hospitalized. May 15th. A subway guard reported that the missing cars from March had arrived, with all inside dead, save for one individual. The bodies were all mutilated in strange ways. When the one survivor was questioned, she attempted to attack the team sent in, and was shot dead. May 20th. All children in New York City vanished. No traces were found.
May 21st. Torrential rain begins to pour. Witnesses recall seeing up to 50,000 people walking together. All walking together poured oil on themselves and were lighting themselves on fire and flying into the sky towards a bright light. Similar reports came from every major metropolitan area worldwide. After this, the remaining people were greeted with darkness. There was no more sun. There was nothing.
You wanted it. You sat through this long. You watched it, engaged with it. You desired, demanded to see it. Well, here it is. Here is what you've been waiting for. May 28th. It started early. People on their commutes to work, enjoying or hating life as they had countless days before. COVID was finally letting up. Maybe things could start going back to normal. It started raining. The rain wasn't unusual. It started a drizzle, and then it started pouring. It didn't matter though. People were dragged up instantly, being pulled agonizingly by every pore in their body. Most of the victims died from suffocation or hypothermia. The rest died by falling to the ground. None of those caught in the rain would survive, except for one. They were not unscathed either. Far from it. They had latched onto a light post as they were rising, but the sky still stripped all the oil from their body, causing mass necrosis of their fat cells and goring open all their pores. They were saved with the full might of the medical community to try and gain some deeper insight, but they knew nothing. Why would they assume a victim would know anything to begin with? Well, all the corpses had their faces mangled into contorted grins as they breached the clouds. It directly morphed their skeletal structure and DNA, but is unknown whether it affected their psyche or not. So, what happened? It's unclear. No one knows what compelled the rains to start lifting all those afflicted by oil, but it stayed. It expanded globally. People tried warning them too, posts online years ago, from sources both oblivious and clearly in possession of certain knowledge, but no one listened. Their prophecy was a mockery, a sick joke. Really, all of it was a sick joke in the end. It wasn't just New York, and it wasn't just the rain. Other locations had plights as well. A strange plague of alien worms infiltrate Southeast Asian cities, eating away and hollowing people from the inside out until they multiply and puppet the interior husk, leaving the skin and bones and nervous system just for manipulation. These poor souls never die, but are instead trapped in their own body with nothing between their nerves and pounds of writhing, dirty worms. But as the 28th drew to a close, the madness stopped for a time. Many of their new problems were recurring, and others would still happen. Other incidents. Humanity tried their best to keep going and rebuild, but the assault was too much. Society collapsed, and all that was left were isolated communities of survivors. The causes behind the specific incidents may be unknowable, but the greater cause of everything is. Rewind exactly 5 years prior. May 28th, 2016. The news is erupting in a flare. A fallen child. Team of snipers. Horror. I was at the dentist at the time and watching the news on their CCTV. One dead gorilla. Yes. May 28th, 2021 is the 5th anniversary of Harambe's untimely death. This is our penance. Was he simply a harbinger, a warning? Or is his death the sole reason for all the suffering? Regardless.
The bang.
That was the last incident. When the last person dies, there will be no one left to give name to tragedy. No longer an incident if there is no one to call it misfortune to. There will be only ashes and dead memes. The comedy cemetery. The end. This is the inevitable end of the Trollface incidents. It doesn't much matter if the trollge destroys the globe or the universe or anything, this will still happen. This is greater than the physical planet, it's the fate of the planet of ideas. When all positive energy has been beaten out of it, when all good things have gone to heaven, the earth simply becomes renamed to hell. There is nothing. Until then, though, until inevitability, have creativity. Have fun. You have a lot of time, but it is finite. To make it just a bit brighter is to make it all worthwhile. Then, rain or shine, you can face tomorrow with open arms, regardless of what may happen. We always talk of trollge, to troll and purge. It's always the negative. You don't see that it always ends bad? It always does, but Trollface isn't evil inherently. No. Control your life. Control your destiny. The only way to survive Heaven Stairway is to realize the insanity of the world you've inherited and use it against it. Make the unthinking world fear you and give something for the sentient to fight for. Be there for people. Be the antithesis. When things stop making sense, there is nothing stopping you from crossing insurmountable odds and beating the tar out of what is in your way. In our way. Reality is scarier than the fiction that trollge allows to torment itself. Even existence is incidental, though. Everything really is. Everything and nothing. Chaos and order. Trollge and control.
was mad, he knew he'd been had, so he shot at the sun with a gun. Shot at the sun with a gun. Shot at his wily one, only friend. You understand, mechanical hands are the ruler of everything. Ruler of everything. I'm the ruler of everything in the end. Number your thumb, impossible sum of the monkey fist hung on a vine. Organism assembly line. Everything's gonna be fine. We pretend.
Do you like how I dance? I got zirconium pants.
Consequential enough to slip you into a trance.
Do you like how I walk? Do you like how I talk?
Do you like how my face
Disintegrates into chalk.
I have a wonderful wife. I have a powerful job. She criticizes me for being egocentric.
You practice your mannerisms into a wall.
If this mirror were clearer, I'd be standing so tall.
So you swallow over peppers on the side of the hill.
I was observing the birds circling for the kill.
I've been you, I know New York facade is a scam.
You know you're making me cry. This is the way that I am. I've been living a lie, a metamorphical scheme.
Detective undercover on the hood, objective obscene. Oh no, no, oh yeah.
Thank you all for watching. I hope this gave you some insight into how a meme actually spreads and how easily information is stored, even in our interconnected age. If you still want more content related to this, I recommend watching Raymundo Khan's video coming up, where he actually goes to the site where the original video was taken. I mean, the original image, god damn it, and interviews me. And also, stay tuned for more stuff like this. Uploads will probably be infrequent, but I'm already working on an iceberg video for the most dark and obscure Minecraft server ever. Additionally, I have a lot of aspiration for making fiction in general, so if you like absurd physics and action/horror, I definitely recommend checking out the comic Dim Star Retrograde by my friend Sinatra. Remember him? He was mentioned way back. He made the fucking Tom Scott meme. The art is insane, and it has a lot of promise. That said, you can find me on Twitter at ebola_granola. And I'll see you guys later, and trolls, don't get blocked.